G'day folks, and welcome to yet another Blender Guru tutorial. In this tutorial we are of course making clouds, or a cloudscape, whatever you would call this thing. We are going to be using the Cycles rendering engine, the new volumetric rendering, which has only recently been added to Blender, so very exciting, and does produce some very cool results if you know how to use it well. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It did take me a very long time to figure this out, like 2 weeks, and a lot more challenging than I thought. But anyways, I'm going to be sharing all of the little secrets that I came across to creating wonderful looking clouds in Blender. So before we jump into the tutorial, this right here is what it looks like inside Blender, the final looking result. Okay, so it sort of looks like a waffle that's been it's been sliced, and it's got some funny stuff inside it. But let me just break it down just so that you can understand, because this is, you know, quite a longish looking tutorial. So just to give you an overview of sort of how it's all put together. So we start with this misshapen looking plane, and then we add in some displacements in order to give it this wavy pattern to create the look of those rolling cloud waves that you often see when you're in an airplane. There's like a shelf of clouds, right? You know what I'm talking about. And then we're adding on top of that a particle system of little tiny clouds, and these have a very low density, which when, you know, layered over the top of each other creates this sort of mist across the surface, which was another little cool trick that I learned. Then on top of that, we're adding in some sort of hand modeled, well, not hand model, this is mostly displacements, but some more detailed looking clouds closer to the camera, and then sandwiching it with a cloud layer on top of it as well. So we have the sun that sort of shines through it, and it should look pretty cool. So yeah, it took me a really long time, and just for the sake of, you know, for anyone out there that's tried it and failed, you can see how much I failed when I got started. So this was my first early attempts at making clouds. I tried a variety of different types, and kept posting them on Twitter. And everybody was like, it's rubbish, it looks terrible, it looks like pillow fluff, you know, and so that was disheartening. But anyway, kept at it, and learned a lot of things. One, that basically everybody's idea of what a cloud looks like is different. Sometimes you can get something that looks exactly like a reference photo, and then people say that it looks wrong. So, I mean, there are so many different types of clouds out there. I'm not a cloudologist, but I know of like the different types. This is a cartoon cloud, but there's like the you know, the cirrus cloud, oh gosh, I can't remember the main name of it. Cumulus cloud. That's, you know, the big puffy one. There's all different types of clouds. You can have a Google of it if you're really curious. But yeah, so many different types. They all look weird. They all are incredibly hard to generate using 3D software, which is why it's taken me so long to create this tutorial. But anyways, hope this little slideshow here eased any anybody that's given it a go before and failed. It's a lot of trial and error. So anyways, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started on the actual tutorial. So, new scene open in Blender. And the first thing we're going to do is position our camera dead and center in front of our grid floor by hitting Control Alt number pad 0. Okay, I'm positioning it around about there. And the next thing we want to do is set the parameters, like the length of our scene, because we are dealing with technically a scene that never ends. It's the world. It just goes on around in a curvature, right? So how far, you know, in the distance do we have clouds appearing? And one thing I learned through trial and error was that in order to create a realistic looking scene, you really have to create a lot of clouds that go way out onto the horizon. So we're going to be using a scene that's about 400 meters in length, which in Imperial, I have no idea what that is. So good luck. But the way we set this up is with our camera selected, with the clipping, if we set this to 400, that is the same as if it was metric, it would be 400 meters. if we set that, then down here, if we check limits, you can now see where 400 meters ends exactly. So that's how long our scene actually has to be. That's how far the clouds have to go into the distance. So yeah, you might be thinking that's going to kill my computer, but don't worry. I thought the same thing until I learned a couple of little tricks. So I'll share them with you. So first thing we're going to do is, of course, add in our plane, and this is going to be the shelf that your clouds sit on. And from the camera view, where you are looking right now, we're just going to scale this out until those 2 points are out of frame. Okay, wherever your camera is, make sure it's out of frame. And then with that, we've now got basically the view of where the camera is. But I'm going to delete these 2 vertices down here. And now I'm going to scale that down all the way out past the camera. And the reason I'm doing this is, instead of just keeping it like this, and applying clouds and stuff in there, I'm actually just going to subdivide this and then shave off the rest of it, because we want to be able to add displacements to this. All right, so if that doesn't make any sense, you don't worry, I'll just follow along. All right, so we're going to subdivide this. Okay, so hit W, subdivide, and for the number of cuts, I'm going to give it 100 cuts. 100 fair cuts, I think, is enough. Maybe that's not even enough. It's funny when you rehearse. I've rehearsed this tutorial. It works fine. And then look, I'm just gonna go 150. All right, okay. That looks pretty good to me. Okay, so with 150 cuts, I am, from the view of the camera. Actually, I'll split this so you can see what's actually happening. From the view of the camera, outside of the frame, whatever is outside of the frame, using the circle select tool with C, I am going to select everything right up into the edge of that camera frame, and then do the exact same thing on the other side there. And you can see on the right hand side there exactly what is happening. We're selecting everything which the camera is not going to see. And this is important because everything that's outside of the camera frame, even though it's not going to be rendered, it's still going to slow down your computer when it comes to rendering. So this is the same technique that I teach in the Architecture Academy for creating grass and things like that. It's basically a matter of just optimizing your scene, so that you don't have stuff that's not rendered showing up in your scene. All right, so anyways, now that I've got that, I'm going to hit X and then delete those faces. Okay, so now we have a plane that looks like it's been cut by like one of those crazy scissors that you get in preschool. But that's fine. It doesn't matter. It's outside of the frame. It's all fine and dandy. So now that we've got this, we can add some displacements to it. So first things first, modifier, displace, new texture. Okay. And for our texture, the texture type that we're going to be displacing our plane with, we're going to be using the wood texture, this one here, which looks really crazy horrible in this position, right? But here's one thing that we're going to change. First of all, you want to apply the scale of your plane, because we've scaled it up and it's all weird at the moment. So apply that scale. And what we want to do is we want to have more control over the way this pattern is appearing. And currently it just generates the displacement according to the object itself, like how big it is and whatever else. But we want more control. So the way we can do this is by adding in an empty. And this empty is going to act as like our controller for this texture. So let's call this, let's just call it waves, okay? There's a little, oh, by the way, delete the cube and the default lamp, okay? Okay, and with this little empty here, let's just move this by itself so it doesn't get lost in there. And with that selected, I'm now going to go back to, with the plane selected, I'm going back to the texture coordinates. I'm going to set that to object, and then the object, I'm going to select that empty, waves. So now that I've done that, guess what? Let's add in a subsurf. Oh, triangulate, that's bad. Subsurf, position that on top. And then if I scale this up, first of all, when you scale it, it'll look all terribly weird until it gets to a point where it starts to cooperate. There we go, about that, okay? And now when we scale it, we have an exact scale over how many waves is actually appearing across our surface here. And you can also rotate this as well, which is also a really handy thing that you couldn't do if you were just using the default displacement coordinates. Now at this point you might be wondering, what exactly are we creating here? Are we just making stuff up as we go along? Partly. No, it's based off of reference photos. So one place I recommend you go to get reference photos is a place called Pixabay. Pixabay. So this site is absolutely amazing. It gives you images which are only available under Creative Commons 0 license. That means you can download these images and use them however you want. Like you could take this image, print it out on a canvas, and then sell it as your own artwork, and that's fine. Like it's a crazy. I think Shutterstock, iStock Photo, they should be scared because this site is taking off. All right. So anyways, this site is great for backgrounds, anything that you want to do in your artwork. I just wanted to show it to you. But let's go clouds rolling. I don't know, I'm just trying to find a photo. Clouds wave. Oh no. Come on. Show me an image which is really gonna. You know what? I've actually got some saved on my hard drive. I should actually just bring these up. And that way we won't have to waste all this time, will we? So let me just bring this up. There we go. This is what we're trying to go for. This is from Pixabay. So this sort of look, this very chuggety, looks like cottage cheese. You know, that awful thing that really should not have been invented, but is evidently very good for you. It looks exactly like that. So first of all, it's got a little bit of a wavy pattern, just a little bit, sort of slight, but we're exaggerating it. So one thing we can do is go back to our texture here and turn on band noise, and that's going to give us, set this to smooth. It's going to give us more control. It's going to make it look more like a real, clouds with waves and stuff. You can turn down the turbulence, which is appropriately named, I must say, for this exact theme. But something like that, that's pretty fine and dandy. And the next thing I'm going to do is turn up the strength of it. Let's just go with 2 for now, see where that is. And as well as that, this is a good time to position your camera. Okay, now if you don't know much about composition, it's all right, but here's a little rundown. Rule of thirds. Okay, so if you've got your camera selected, composition guide, turn on thirds for your rule of thirds. And you can see we've got this little outline. So with that, what we want to do is position the camera so that it is on the horizon. So 1/3 of the image is above this this wavy cloud thing. So I'm raising the camera just a little bit because this is where we're going to be able to see it. So the reason we're looking through the camera now is because we're adjusting, how much of this, how big should these waves be and all that other stuff. So something like this, I think, should look pretty good. Yeah, it sounds very exact, doesn't it? But yeah, something like that, okay? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in another displacement. So you can just hit copy if you like. That's a quicker way of doing things. And then delete that texture, and we'll add a new one, hit new texture. And then let's go over here, select that new texture, and select Voronoi. Voronoi looks like this crazy cell cracked like desert floor kind of thing, which normally is not all that useful. But when we add it as a displacement modifier, what's going on here? Sorry, I'm sort of lost my train of thought. Let's call this Voronoi so that we actually can identify it in our displacement stack. Okay, good. We can turn up this amount here. And actually, let's turn off this wavy one just so we can have a look at that. Okay, so this is what this is what we've got at the moment. Let's turn this up. Okay, cool. One thing you want to check at the moment is which direction your normals are facing, because chances are they're facing downwards, which is incorrect. So what you want to do is go to your shading UVs or whatever it is, and then hit flip direction on those. So they're now pointing upwards in the right direction, which is important because of later on when we get to stuff. Anyways, with this Voronoi texture added, you'll see that normally it's this sort of wavy, like concave shapes, and it's not very useful, right? But this is a new feature. This is something that like amazed me when I tried it, because normally if you added something as a displacement, and then in the texture options, if you went underneath colors, these options wouldn't actually affect the displacement, but now it does. So check this out. You click on ramp, and then you hit this little button here, and that's going to invert it. And look at that. now you get this bubbly look that goes across everything, which is perfect because it's very cloud-like, right? So look at some reference photos and you know what I mean. So I'm toning down the contrast just so it's not a little over the top. I also find that distance squared is a little bit more accurate, something like that. Okay, and then we are going to turn down the size of this to like 0.05 because we want to get some really small bumps. Okay, and let's turn up the subsurf just for this portion because we want to get, eventually, remember, we're trying to create this sort of look, all right? The camera's a lot closer to it, and it doesn't have to be exact, but, you know, it has to look sort of close, hopefully, right? Let's try 0.2. Till we can actually start to see, all right, let's try 0.1. Start to see little bumps appearing. That's not too bad. I might go a little bit smaller than that, 0.08. Yeah, okay. And then let's turn on the waves to see how that looks. The wave pool. Yeah, that's I think those waves are a little over the top, actually, to tell you the truth. Yeah, so that's gonna mess up everything. So let's actually no, stop. Don't touch the empty because we've just got the Voronoi texture exactly right. Instead, let's go back to the waves. Wood, whatever you want to call that thing. Let's just double up on that. Let's just make that wood texture double its size. Oh, that's the size of the that's a bummer. That's the size of the noise. Okay, so that means we have to actually, all right, so to do this, let's first of all let's turn this off so that this moves faster. Let's double the size of that. So I just scaled that by 2. Okay, so it's really big now. So now the waves are actually, they're affecting it like sort of the way it should. So it's like about that. That's good. Now when we turn on, you know, our Voronoi displacement will probably be the wrong size. So let's just check that out. Good. Yeah, because it's using the exact same empty. That's why. So if this isn't making any sense to you, I really apologize. This is one of those tutorials where it's really, there's a lot going on. Trying to phrase everything so it's, you know, makes some sort of sense. But either way, okay, there we go. Look at that. Okay, so we've got the rough sort of looking floor that looks like that, right? It's amazing. We got there eventually. Great. Let's save this before we screw it up. Very important, by the way. Working with volumetrics, cycles, crashes a lot. And doesn't give you any warning whatsoever, especially if you're using GPU to render it. So save a lot. It's taking a long time. It does this every now and then. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now let's get to actually doing some rendering. First things first, what do we need? A lamp. I hear you say, yes, we need a lamp. So this is a sun lamp, obviously. And what I'm doing is I'm positioning it around about where I actually want my real sun to be. All right. And then I'm going to scale this out like so and position it about there. Okay. Now you don't want to have this completely flat. Otherwise you will not get any light that actually hits our plane here. Okay. So you have to have it tilted down just slightly like that. The other thing is, because now we've got that in the exact spot that we want it, now I can rotate it until it tilts exactly in line with where our camera is. Ta-da! Okay, so now before we do a render, I'm going to change a couple things. First things first, our material of this cloud here has to look like a cloud. So we're going to the node editor over here. We're giving it a new material. Oof, oof. It froze there for a second. I was kind of freaking out. Let's just turn off this subset. There we go. Okay. And what we're going to do, I just deleted the default node here, and we are going to add in a volume scatter node. Okay, so you've got 2 volume options here currently in Blender: volume absorption, volume scatter. just to give you a brief overview, volume absorption is for when light passes through an object and gets darker over time. So like, you know, when you look in a lake and it's muddy and it gets darker and darker towards the bottom, that's when you use volume absorption. Volume scatter is when the light hits something and then it scatters it so that light hits like the other side of it, right? So like the opposite effect. So that's why we use, for clouds, we would of course use volume scatter. All right, so add that in and connect that to volume. Make sure nothing is in surface. This entire tutorial, make sure that nothing is in this surface input. It's kind of weird because for the past, like, I don't know, 3 years that cycle's been around, everything's been in surface. Now we've got volume, so make sure it's always in volume. All right, great. All right, let's do a little render now with what we have. But first, actually, let's change the sun. Let's give it some orange light because it's a sunset sort of scene, and we'll give it the strength of an ox, 18, which is really crazy for the sun, but it's what we're going to go with. So let's give this a render now, and let's see how this looks. This is rendering on my it's rendering CPU. That means it's not going to crash at least. Okay, so that is it's actually not too bad, but one thing we will note is actually it is actually rendering it like the way it should. We want to have some sky lighting. Okay, so let's add in a background for the world and turn up this brightness there. And let's give it a bluish purple color. You know, the sky turns a little bit kind of purplish in the late afternoon, evening. So a little bit purple, but I always set the saturation of the color down to about 0.3. Okay, leave the strength at 1. And let's give this another render now, and let's see how this looks with the new world color. Oh, look at that. You may have noticed. Yeah, it's no difference whatsoever. The color, the world is not affecting our clouds whatsoever. Why is that, you may ask? Wow, good question. It's underneath here. You need to, where it's got settings, check multiple importance, which is very bizarre because it's a solid color, but you need to do it in order for it to affect your volumes. So now that we've checked that, let's give this a render right now. Let's see how this looks. Ta-da! Now look at that. We now have the world affecting the lighting of our clouds. But wait, there is more. The volumetrics, the light that goes through the volume, currently there is no bouncing whatsoever. So when we add in all the layers and clouds and all that kind of stuff, it won't look very good unless you go down to light paths and you set volume bounces to at least 1. Now, if you leave it at 0 and then later on you change it to 1, you'll notice that the entire scene suddenly looks brighter. So that's why I advise doing it right now. So I'll show you now. It should look a lot brighter now that we've added in 1 volume bounce. Ta-da! See, just like I said. So, yeah, basically that means that light is now bouncing at least once through the volume, which will turn up render times. Actually, how much did it actually turn it up? 2 seconds. That's actually not too bad. Anyways, the other thing we want to do is we actually want to get rid of this blue sky in the background there because we want it to be transparent, because later on we're actually going to be assembling all these pieces in an image editor, not in Blender. It sounds bad, but trust me, there's a good reason for it, and I'll get to it very later on. So we want that to be transparent. So underneath film in your render settings here, check transparent. Now give that another render, and the sky should now be transparent. Now, one problem that I always encountered, and for some reason I haven't encountered now, so I'm fixing a problem that you can't see, but perhaps you're seeing it on your screen. Perhaps you're seeing what appears to be like lines that are appearing across your scene. Like you're not getting the full fuzzy look of this look that we've got here at the moment. The reason for that is that we are using a volumetric shader, and this is a flat plane. So normally what you get is it won't render properly, okay? So the way that you get around this, I don't know why it's working. It's kind of stupid. I'm telling you why it does something, but it's not doing it. Either way, what we need to do is we need to give it some volume. So you add in the solidify modifier. You drop that in at the bottom there, set the thickness to 10, and make sure, by the way, oh yeah, the normals are in the right direction now. That's good. So now that we've done that, if any of you at home have the problem that you should have had, really, honestly, I mean, I don't know why that actually worked just before. That's very bizarre. But it would now actually be fixed. So anyways, ta-da, that's good. So the next step is adding in the fluffy mist, which is going to appear across the surface of the clouds, which really is a big selling point. Not a selling point, but it's a big part of the final image, is getting that misty effect that goes way off into the distance here. And that's one thing which is which I learned, to make a cloudscape look real, the clouds have to go all the way to the horizon. So we're going to be using a particle system. We're going to first model just a couple of clouds, like 3 or 4 of them, and then we're going to use a particle system to generate that across the entire surface. Okay, so new layer, and this is actually really cool. This is fun. Okay, we're starting with a cube. Okay, like this, just positioning it so the origin point is at the base, which is important. And then I'm going to extrude this out 3 times. And to about that, so it looks like a podium. And that is our cloud, believe it or not. So what we're going to do is, just with this very, very basic geometric shape, we're going to create a cloud out of this. You don't believe me, but watch, check this out. First, a subsurf modifier. Then, displacement modifier. I swear, that's my favorite modifier. I use it now continuously. A new displacement modifier. And we're going to be using the Voronoi texture, just like what we did before with the surface of the cloud. Ramp, inverted, and let's set the size of it. Yeah, let's go for something like that. All right, that's actually also let's crank up the view of the subdivisions. I mean, okay, and let's set that to smooth. Okay, so we've now already got that lumpy sort of look of clouds, which normally you would have to model yourself using the sculpt tool, which is cool. You can save all this time. Okay, so you can tweak these results however you like, but you want to try and keep it some big lumpy sort of looking effects. Let's turn down the contrast so it's not too over the top, and let's go distance squared. There we go. Now we've got it a little bit nicer looking. Cool. Look at that. Looks like a little marshmallow thing. I want to eat it. Next, another displacement modifier. This one, actually give them names so that we don't get them mixed up. Voronoi, whatever. And this one is going to be called clouds, not to be confused with our subject. We are going to be using the cloud type of the texture. And this one is... let's try setting this like that, something like that. Actually, no, that kind of looks really bad, doesn't it? Okay, now we can see the effects of the clouds. So scaling it down a little bit. All right, and you don't want to have it where you're getting these. You'll see that right there. That's going to cause an artifact in your render. So you have to avoid that if at all possible. So tone it back up a little bit until you get something that looks fairly nice-ish, like that, okay? Now, at this point, what you want to do is we also want to add in an empty to control the displacement, and this is, I'll show you why in just a second. First, let's call this displacement the iCloud, all right? And I'm not trying to be funny, well, I am kind of, it's kind of cute, but the reason I'm calling it the iCloud is because these are instant instances of clouds. So iCloud, right? Yeah, I'm pretty clever. All right, whatever. So setting again, texture coordinate, iCloud, right? Now, if I duplicate this, look what happens. We get a completely different cloud shape. I mean, most of it looks exactly the same, but as you move it around, you get completely different. So that's why is one reason to always use an object instead of just the default displacement. Okay? All right, so now that I've done that, I can now just create a bunch of really simple geometric shapes and turn them into clouds. Just by going like that, then hitting Shift, selecting that, Control L, modifiers. And look at that. We now have a cloud. So easy. Let's do another one. This one is going to be, what's it going to be? Let's go, sort of run out of ideas. Something like that, maybe. See how that looks. Yeah, it's not too bad, I guess. It's all right. And then let's go for one more. And this one is going to be a tall guy, big giant thing. And I'm going to scale this outwards like that. Ta-da! And there we go. So we now have 4 unique looking clouds generated very quickly, thanks to using this empty there. So very, very cool. Great. Now what you want to do is create a group out of these objects so that we can use them in a particle system. So hit Control G, and for some reason it's already given it the correct name, iClouds. So yay, awesome. Now that we've done that, we can go, oh, actually, first of all, just for the point of like viewing this, you can see how it looks like clouds. But because we're going to be using like 3,000 of these clouds here, having this level of subsurf is ridiculous and will almost certainly crash your computer. So tone it back like as much as you can. I'm going to try and keep mine at level 3, and also just for the viewport so it doesn't crash it on the next part, just keep it like fairly low as well, okay? Because again, it's this times 3,000, okay? Just apply that to all of those, so it'll render at 3 but view at 2, okay? Because the reason we don't need all this detail, by the way, because this is going to be set at a very, very low density, so it should just look like a fine mist when they're overlapping each other, okay? So don't worry that it looks like little turds, all right? It'll look fine in the final render. Okay, so with our big plane here selected, let's add in a new particle system, select hair as the type, and you'll notice that it's now underneath our surface here. And the reason for that is we've got the solidify modifier on top of the particle system. So we need the particle system to be generated there and then the solidifier after it. So move the particle system up one, and now it's now generating on top like it should. So back at our particle system here, headquarters, let's turn on advanced, and then down here underneath render, select group as the type, and then select the only group that exists, iClouds. Then select rotation, which is really suspicious looking results, and then set the size of this to 0.3, okay? So we get a result that looks like this. So they're now all standing up on the wrong end, all right? Now, I don't know why it is like this, but it's always been like this. You have to physically, in front view, rotate your instanced clouds objects 90 degrees to the right so that they position on the correct way on an actual surface. Makes zero sense, but that's what you have to do. I hope one day it changes. Who will change it? I don't know if it ever will. Either way, now that you've done that, underneath rotation, set this to normal, and then you can now increase this rotation, and now if you look at that, all of these clouds are now individually rotating at a random amount, which is perfect, because if they were all exactly the same, then you'll see repeating looking clouds across the whole thing, which is not good. So having it like that, now we've got some randomness to it, and we're going to turn up the random size as well. So now they all have a different size as well. Actually, let's turn up the, let's just turn up that, yeah, the size of those, 0.35 or something. All right, so before we do a render though, we have to give our clouds here a material. So let's call these, the material, let's call them iClouds, just for the sake of this terrible running joke. And we're just going to give it a volume scatter shader, plug that into the volume input, and then set the density for that to 0.1. So if you look at the preview of that, you should be able to see almost nothing. Okay, so normally you'll be able to see some sort of volume there. Okay, but we're setting it to 0.1. So really, really, really subtle, which is why in the final render, you won't really be able to see much at all. But when they're overlaid over the top of each other, you will see something, okay? Now, before we do a render, underneath your sampling, you want to set this to at least 30, otherwise you're going to get a horrible, noisy looking mess. So we've set that to 30. I'm going to set, because we're rendering on CPU, set the performance to 16 size tiles, and let's go 7 so it doesn't completely crash the computer. This is just for me, by the way. And then let's go ahead and hit render on, let's actually see, let's see this. Let's go to a new render slot, and let's see how this looks now. Okay, if you were unfortunate enough to actually hit render when I just did, then you'll see this. The reason for that is we gave a material to one of our clouds, but the rest of them have the default diffuse material. So select all of them, hit Control L on the last one, and then hit material, so that they now all share the material like they should. All right, so now that we've done that, let's give it a render, and it should now actually look proper. Great, so this at least now has the correct material, and we can see there's somewhat of a mist, but it's interrupted by an awful, horrible, dark black parts. It's this artifact that appears across the entire render. And for most of the 2 weeks, I had no idea what was causing it. I thought it was a displacement modifier. I didn't know how to get rid of this. And I only just figured it out like yesterday what the actual cause of the problem is. All right, this is it. The reason you're getting all these black things appearing there is that underneath down here, some of you probably already know the answer, okay? But it took me a very long time. All right, just take it easy on me. Underneath where it's got transparency, it's got by default the maximum amount of transparency, meaning objects that are transparent overlapping each other, that Blender will show is 8, which in this case is not enough, obviously, so it's showing everything else as black. So increase that to 30, give it a render, and ta-da! Everything looks wonderful. So as you can see, that was the one fix that I needed all week. But it looks a lot better now, obviously. So we now have a nice fine mist that is appearing across everything. And all those shapes that, you know, that we went to the trouble of modeling and everything, they're really, really a faint outline. So if your computer is like struggling, you can get away with turning it down like a notch or 2, okay, on the subsurf department. Because, yeah, like from the point of view of this, you can't actually really see those shapes all that clearly. So yeah, so that's fine. So now we have the mist. The next part of this is actually adding in some thicker clouds, some clouds that have detail. And this is obviously, you know, where a lot of the character of the render is going to come from, because it's where you're actually seeing the thickness of the clouds. And it's also one of the hardest parts, because, you know, you can now actually see the problems that are going to appear, as opposed to this mist where a lot of stuff is hidden. But follow along with me, and we should be fine, hopefully. But just for this this next part, I'm going to disable... yeah, I'll just disable this stuff. Actually, what was I just disabling? Oh goodness, hang on. I think I selected one of these. Okay, I thought I was disabling the plane. Okay, all right. So, like I said, just for the sake of this, I am turning off all of this stuff just so that we can focus on this cloud part, because it will be kind of memory intensive. So let's go to a new layer now, and we're going to do some cloud modeling, just like what we did before, okay? But these are ones that are, of course, going to be a little bit closer to the camera, and so their shape and appearance is a little bit more important. And I did not select the entire face, so let's try that again. Okay, so this is sort of like this. This shape here is sort of like the standard shape of a cloud, like the cartoony, I don't know what you call it, like the podium sort of looking thing. So actually, you know what I could do? I just exactly copy that one right there. So that's going to save me having to add in all of those ones by themselves. But of course with this, these are going to be a lot closer to the camera, so I'm going to ramp this up to like 6, all right? Which is fairly heavy on, but it's going to have some thickness to it, so we're actually going to be able to see all this detail in the cloud. So very important that it shows through and actually looks correct. So from where the camera is, right here, this guy is going to be pulled forward. He's going to be about here. So these are ones that are going to be sort of close to the camera. I mean, sorry, obviously they're close to the camera. But yeah, no, that's right. They're going to be close to the camera, so we can sort of keep the standard shape. Once we go out into the distance, we have to start making bigger looking clouds, and that's when we have to start tweaking, you know, this object, the displacement factor, or whatever you want to call that thing. Gosh, the words as you go through a tutorial just gradually degrade into just nonsense. Either way, okay, so we've now got sort of 2 outlining things, which is sort of, you know, compositionally thinking. It's gonna just that outer rim there, it's sort of acting like a vignette. It's gonna guide your focus a little bit more towards the center here. Now the point, the goal of this is to have like sort of like some clouds which are appearing on the left-hand side here, like a big clump of them, and then a small clump on the right-hand side, and the sun just peeking through enough, and the shadows of those thick clouds will cast through the rest of it, and it should get this nice sort of look, okay? That's what we're hoping for. Now, first of all, if we have a look at just these guys here, in fact, actually, because I want to just have a render of just those, let's move the camera and this guy to a layer all on its own, just so that I can focus on these 2. Okay, I just hit the forward number pad / thing. I don't know if I already said it or not, but the screen keys tool doesn't work with the latest version of Blender, so that's why they're not just showing. I don't know if I already said that or not, but either way. Okay, so we need to give it a material, and this material is going to be a little bit more advanced than the ones we've given it before. So we're going to get a little bit fancy. Okay, so let's add in a noise texture. And we're going to plug that into a volume scatter node. Plug that in like we have before. Make sure you plug the factor into the density input. The density input is going to affect the dense parts of it. All right, very technical term. Okay, so with this here, let's just turn this back just a little bit, and let's have a look at how that looks just by itself. Okay, it doesn't look all that different. Okay, like the texture, you can't really see much. So let's try this just so that we can see it. Let's add in right here a brightness and contrast node. Let's turn the contrast up to 2, and there you go. You can see some chunks starting to show. And let's turn the brightness of that down. There we go. Actually, let's go, I saved, and then Blender did its thing where it now thinks it's going to save for 5 minutes. Oh, okay, that worked. Okay, I'm going to go to GPU rendering mode just so this goes a little bit faster for this part. Okay, so you can now see very roughly how this noise texture here is affecting this cloud here. And the texturing that you do in this part for the materials is very important, because you can only do so much with the geometry of your cloud. Like, you can't really get the level of detail that is necessary when you have a look at real photos of clouds. Like, when you look at this, like, look at how, like, it's all splayed spaghetti kind of craziness. Like, you just cannot physically, thanks, whatever that was, Mr. Printer. Yeah, you physically cannot, like, model this. You really just can't do it. So this is why using a texture is necessary. And getting it right is one of the finer points of making a cloud, and it's what took a really, really long time to get right. So one thing I'll give you an advice on straight away is not to use the default texture coordinates of this. Like, normally, you know, just using, like, this is what it's using by default, the generated texture coordinates. And that's what normally you would use for something where you're not UV unwrapping. It's a good thing about volumetrics. You never have to UV unwrap. That's cool. But it doesn't work for this. It's actually, I don't know if you can see it on the left side there, it's actually stretched it just slightly. And I'm not sure why that particularly is for volumetrics, but what you need to do instead is load in the geometry node and then set the position to the vector input. And now you will actually get the noise or whatever, the texture appearing based off the position of the geometry, whatever. It will actually, it's not going to be squished or whatever. It's always just going to look the way it should, okay? So I now need to turn this down to about that, and that should be fine. Now, I'm going to set this brightness, let's turn that to 3, something like that. Okay, that's pretty good. And what I want to do is actually combine 2 of these. So I'm going to take 2 of these noise textures, take the output, put that into the right there, and then let's add in a mix RGB node, and then let's set this to multiply. And then if I set this to 1, we should now get some bigger, chunkier bits of the noise texture showing through, as well as some sort of finer parts. So this is how you get some sort of like layered looking effects. You can also turn up the distortion, which will sort of give it sort of like a squiggly sort of look, which from the point of view of the camera looks a little bit like that. So if it's too much, you can turn up the brightness, and that will sort of fill it in a little bit more. But you know, you kind of want to have that detail sort of showing through. Okay, so that's one of them. All right, so let's give this a material. Let's call it, oh, actually, sorry, one other thing as well. I forgot to mention. So the density of this at the moment, we don't really have any control over it, because before we had, you know, this density amount, and we could do so much with that. But now we've got something that plugs into that, we can't control the density. It seems like it's now just arbitrarily controlled. So this is what you do. You add in a math node, set it to multiply. This value here now acts as the density amount. So if you turn this down, you can see the density is lowering and lowering and lowering till it's almost nothing. So now I'm going to set this to like 2, and that's going to give us a really sort of a thicker looking thing. You can go crazy and give it like a really, really thick cloud, but that'll come out really dark in the render. When we have in all the rest of the stuff. So just keep an eye on it. But yeah, I'm going to go, let's go for 3. Yeah. Seems like I don't know what I'm doing, doesn't it? But there is a lot of like trial and error. Even when you've rehearsed it and you've tried out the thing, there's a lot of trial and error when it comes to making these clouds. All right, just give me a break, guys. Come on, man. Okay, so that's that, and that. Great. Now we're going to make some different looking ones. Well, that zoomed out really far, didn't it? I'm going to add in a cube right here. And this guy is going to be one of the big clouds that's going to sit off on the right-hand side, okay? All by itself. A big, ominous looking thing. Okay. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay. All right, there we go. And now with that, actually I can sort of give it a little bit more thickness here as well. Okay, and let's just, one more on the top there. Apply the same, what did I do? Whew. Control L, I thought it just froze. There's always that moment where you accidentally hit the wrong key in Blender and your heart stops and you're like, I didn't save. And then sometimes it crashes and your worst nightmares are confirmed. But either ways, okay, so this is that's what that big old cloud there looks like. Now we're going to pull it out, and let's turn on, not that much subsurf, but a little bit. And let's turn on this wavy texture, so that we can see like where this should actually be seated. Whoa! This guy, pull it way back. Way back. Way back. Isn't it funny how songs just pop into your head, and then you end up singing it in the middle of a tutorial on the internet? It's weird how that happens. Now I'm scaling this up, but one thing you'll notice is that this noise, the more you scale it up, the more that noise doesn't make sense, right? It starts to become all spiky looking. So this is what you want to do. You need to have different empties for the different scales of the displacement. So we're adding in another empty here. And And let's call this guy big, right? And let's use big for these guys. And then now you can see we're retaining some of that cloud-ish looking shape, which is very important. Okay, great. And I might just, there we go. Okay, that's not too bad. And then, yeah, I'll create a couple more of these little guys here. I feel like this tutorial sort of like slowed down a little bit, hasn't it? Because I'm getting into the, you know why? Because I'm a little nervous, because I'm worried if this is going to turn out wrong. Because it's happened before. I get to the end of a tutorial and then I go, all right, here's the end result. And this is what it is supposed to look like. And I go, dang it. That doesn't look anything like it should. Nobody is going to be happy with this. Then I have to redo it, you know. Just hope it works. So I'm hoping this works, because I've invested too much time. All right, so this is one that I'm going to position, you know, right about here. Let's try. A lot of this really is just like guessing, like here, I guess, you know. There's not an exact science, as I'm sure you can probably tell. It's just a lot of sort of guesswork, you know, and hoping that things will work out. So this guy is going to be bigger. This is a biggish looking cloud. And then I might duplicate this guy, rotate him around so that he is sort of there, but maybe scaled down a little bit and positioned roughly back again, because you don't want to have it looking like they're identical. So actually maybe I can we can make it look a little bit more like it is not a complete rip-off or whatever. I don't know how that's gonna look. Does that look like it could be a cloud? It looks like a baby for some reason. I don't know why. Mermaid? Ah, well. That's the cool thing about clouds, isn't it? It's your imagination. Okay, now I'm really losing the plot. Yeah. Okay. So this is fine. So we want to have it. We want to make sure that they all have the same material to start with. Let's give it material. Okay, but now this one. So these ones we're going to be calling this one cloud up close, okay, because these are the ones in the middle, in up close here, and the ones in the background, because likewise what we did, this displacement here didn't work for the displacement that's in the background there, the same way that our noise here will not work on the big ones in the background either. They'll be too fine, so it will look very weird. So we have to create different materials for what's in the background as well. And at this point you might be wondering, like, geez, Andrew, why didn't you tell me this at the start? This is way too more involved, and you know, if I'd known this, I would have never started the tutorial. But this is just the things that you have to do in order to pull off a convincing result. It's just a lot of tweaking, which I don't like to do. Let's go far. Cloud, far. And yeah, I don't like to do it. But it's unfortunately, it's one of the things that has to be done. So let's tone these down by half, okay? And I'm going to set the viewport color of these to sort of a grayish color, like that. And I'll call this far medium in terms of sort of thickness. And I'll set it to 3. And this one here, I'll give this one cloud far, but I'll call it heavy. This one's going to have a thickness of like multiply by 5. And let's give it a really darkish color. Okay, so a nice strong color there. And let's go 0.5, no, let's go 0.3. Let's go even more. Let's go 0.8, like that. Okay, cool. All right, and this guy here, we're going to give him the same material as that one there. And, all right. Okay. All right, what I'll do, I'm going to duplicate this guy. Let's make sure that he has the correct sort of material. And let's scale him down, and let's make him have, what is it? iCloud, okay. the correct sort of thing. So this is now where we're just layering these clouds here, so that they have the appearance of a real sort of, you know, a real sort of bunch of clouds that are in the sky. And it's just, you know, it's not an exact science. Really, it ain't. It ain't. But yeah, something like this. And you can rotate these around if you think that they're going to start looking the same. That doesn't help. Looks the exact same way on the other side, but either way. Okay. All right. Whew. Enough sort of murmuring around. I don't like that on. I'll put that on that layer. These guys, layer 2. All right. Let's start doing some renders. Whew. Looks like I've done a marathon or something. Okay, let's check those particles. All right, they're going to display. The solidifiers. Good. Good, 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 good. All right, let's give this a render. Let's see how this looks. And we are back. Nice-ish looking result. Not too bad, actually. It took 26 minutes to render. Yeah, that's not normal. It should not happen. The reason it took so long is that I accidentally was rendering it on GPU, which is normally fast, but I had the tile size set to something for the CPU. So that, yeah, it should render at about like a fifth of that. So yeah. Anyways, let's change that to CPU so that it's figured out. Okay, so looking at this scene here, you'll notice that it's pretty good. It's not too bad. I'm actually surprised these clouds in the background there have come out fine, like first go. That's generally, it's pretty rare to see that. I think I'd like maybe these front clouds to maybe have a little bit more thickness. I might just compare it to the... no, actually, I think they might be fine as they are. But you'll notice though that there is like some artifacts here, like these little tiny little dots and squiggly bits. That's just because of the displacement modifier, where there's parts of it, yeah, you can see it actually right there where it's appearing. You could go to the trouble of, you know, tweaking all these values, but then you'll lose some of the detail of it. So what I actually did for my final render was I just went into Photoshop and used the clone brush to just heal those little areas. Like, why not? You know, it's not an animation, it's a still. Do anything you can to reduce the pain. So anyways, this is the result we got so far. It's not too bad. What I will do is let's just turn off this for now. What I want to do is I want to have a little area here where it's sort of like cut out. So I might move these two. I'll position these sort of out and about, sort of about, you know, roughly around about here. I want to have more of a build up on the right hand side, sorry, the left hand side, and so something like that. Let me just see the final one. Yeah, that should be okay. Push that in the back there a little bit. Okay, and I'll just check the, okay, so you want to make sure that your subsurf modifiers, if it's in the background, you can get away with using less. This one here, I don't think it's going to benefit from an extra one there. These big ones, they really do need a lot of the help with the subdivision. So it needs a lot of power because of the fact that they're big. And if they don't look big, like scaled wise, like if they look like really low poly, the scaling looks off and the illusion is broken. So we do not want that, obviously. So, so I'm going to keep this as everything is. That's, yeah, okay, so we've got this big black one here which is blocking a lot of the light, which is good. So I'm going to make another one of those sort of in the background there. I'll scale it up. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm all over the place. I'll push it over there, that's right, because I want to make more of a build up on the left hand side. Okay, and I'll make it sort of come out a little bit as well, and I will use this material. Okay. So if you see what happened there, I changed the material and it changed it on all of these other ones. That's because they are sharing the same data, because I hit Alt-D instead of Shift-D. So you want to make them their own unique individual user, and then you won't have that problem. Okay, so I might, I'll duplicate this guy. I'll rotate him a little bit maybe. have him sort of, I don't know, something like that. Just sort of some puffy looking clouds roughly in the background there, you know. Know what I'm saying? Something like that. And I'll turn the subsurf down just a little bit because it is getting a little bit far out in the back there that I think we can sort of get away with less, you know. And this guy I'll turn up a bit and I'll make sure he has a bigger amount of scaling. So scale him up. So it's just layers, as you can tell. Bunch of layers all doing their thing. And yeah, it's just a bunch of layers, really. It's really all it is. And I mean, you can get really cool results just straight off the bat, and then sometimes it takes a while. But if you're following along, you should be able to get, you know, something semi-decent fairly quickly, I'd hope. I mean, that's the whole point of doing a tutorial, isn't it? Anyways, I think this should be good. One thing I do want, though, is I want there to be more of this mist. So even though, I had it set to 1,000. That's why. It should be 3,000. Okay, alright. Well, let's do another render. This time, you know, CPU. By the way, I'm using CPU instead of GPU because GPU conks out very easily, and when it does, it crashes Blender entirely. So I try to use CPU, you know, as much as possible. I try to use GPU whenever I can, but once it conks out, that's like, you can start losing your file, and that's really dangerous. So I'm keeping it to CPU to play it safe. So let's give that a render now, and that should be a lot faster. I might, actually, yeah, I'll just turn down the subsurf on this. That's one thing, by the way, if your scene is taking forever to render, turn down the subsurf on this main plane here, because that goes way out into the background there, which is a lot of extra geometry to you know, calculate. So you can scale that back to 3 and it should be fine. Anyways, let's give it another render now. Let's see how that looks. Ta-da! And that only took 3 minutes. See, that's all the difference it takes. Just set it to CPU. All right, so this looks a lot nicer. This is what we had before, and this is what we have now. So we've got more. The mist helps a lot. It's built up a lot more, and it's starting to look pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this sunlight just a little bit, because I'm just going to level it out just slightly, so that we get some shadowy looking effects. Because that's what I'm trying to get. Is I want to get this sort of dark cloud here to be sort of casting a shadow. Actually, I might duplicate this one because this one's even heavier. Yeah, how heavy is this one? The density is 5, yeah. So I'll position this one in front of it. Yeah, about there, which I think should give us some cool results. This one I'll move back. Where can I put this guy? Yeah, I'll move him about over there, perhaps. That's good. And then I'll put another, just sort of a filler, you know, fill up some space. I'll position this guy about there. And another little guy just in front of it as well. And these are, of course, varying levels of heaviness in its density, so it should look pretty cool. And the other thing I'm going to do is for the roof. We haven't covered the roof yet. So we need to put the, like a cloud layer going across the top there. My webcam is starting to look really dark, isn't it? Very orange, all right, because it's getting dark outside, all right? So we need a roof. So what we're going to do is just going to duplicate this guy. Hit Alt-D, that's fine. And we need to reverse the offset of that, so set that to 1. So now we're now seeing the bottom of it, which looks good. And we're just going to compress that down nice and low like that. We want to give this sort of appearance like it's sort of like a cave, you know, like we're sort of peering in through 2 shelves of clouds, and we're seeing this this cool effect, this cool sort of, you know, cloudscape that you might see a glimpse of, you know, if you're in a plane or something like that. So that's the sort of that's the illusion that we're going for. Now, if we were to render this, what might happen is your computer might crash. So I'm going to show you a little trick. It's not really a little trick, but I've really only just discovered the weight of it recently. You know, if you've got too much in your scene at once and it keeps crashing, this is what you do. You take that object, you put it on a new layer all by itself, and then you create a new render layer. And I've used render layers before, but I haven't thought about like using them to stop your scene from crashing. So save that. So just that layer that it's on, you just want just that one to render, and then exclude everything else. All right. And then for this one, exclude those that one. So it's basically just like inverting those two like that. Okay. And for this one, we want to have its own sun lamp, and the reason for that is that this sun lamp is pointing slightly down, so we're getting that nice light that's sort of going across the surface. But this one, the one that's going on the roof, this one needs to be pointed upwards, obviously, just slightly upwards, so that it can get that nice effect. Because the thing about the sun lamp is that it is, I don't know what the word is, it doesn't depend on the, like how far away, like that angle there is like across the entire scene. So if you used a spot lamp, then you would get light on both the top and bottom, but we want to use a sun lamp. So anyways, this is just a trick. So I'm just duplicating the lamp, and I'm just creating the exact same effect just on the roof there. So we should get some nice, nice looking effects there. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's bring it all back. And I'm going to do one, I think, final render on these guys. Yeah, I'll do Subsurf 3 for the bottom as well. And let me just check that, just see if there's anything else we could tweak. I think there's one thing I might tweak, is that there's this big old piece of mist right there in the center, which is kind of throwing me off. I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is, and this is something you can do, is if it's sort of distracting, oh, there we go. You can play with the seed value of the particle system until you get something that you actually like. So this one I actually like. So this is the one I'm going to go with, that one. Yeah, it looks kind of good. So I've got that. Everything is ready. Let's do another render and go. All right, so this is the render that we got. I actually, whilst it was paused, I did another render, just because what I wanted to do was get more of a sharpness in its in the shadow, because you can see like it's sort of smooth and you can't really see the areas where it's hidden, you know, from the light. So I wanted to adjust that. So I changed it from 0.1 to 0.02 for that, and I moved this up like very slightly as well. And then I got this result right here. So that's the difference. So just moving the sunlight up just a little bit and then making the shadows harsher can give you a completely different result, which I think personally looks a lot better myself, if I do say so. But what about that roof, right? There was a whole you know, the top part of the roof. So where's that? That is on a separate render layer, which you would combine in here, and it looks like that. So you would want to combine both of those together, basically. So this is what we're going to do. We could combine it all here in Blender. We could do everything in Blender, and it would be a huge mess of nodes. I tried it before just to rehearse it. Not worth it. Much easier just to use an image editor like GIMP. I'm going to be using Photoshop. So this is what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to save this image right here. So I'm going to hit F3, and I'm going to save this as tutorial clouds, right? Make sure that you are saving it as a PNG with the alpha channel, right? Color depth. Let's increase that. All right. Save that, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing for this one. So you just plug that into the composite, and then hit F3 again. And then I'll call this clouds top. And then I'll hit save image. All right, so now that I've got that, what we're going to do is open those up in Photoshop, because that's what we're using. So open those up, both of those together, and this is what we'll do to combine the two together, like this. Put that one at the top. I mean, this part would be easy to do in Blender, just combining one on top of the other. But what we're going to do next is a little bit more work. So we want to add in the background because there is this patch there. Now, what we could do if we were lazy is, you know, we could just make that white, but that doesn't look all that realistic. It looks sort of like I got lazy and just made the background white, you know? And it also doesn't give us a lot of choice on what we could do for the sun, because the sun has got to be somewhere here, and it doesn't give us a lot of choice. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this image here from Pixabay. So I've put a link. If you're watching this on Blender Guru, you can download this exact image, and we're just going to paste it in. Paste this guy in, and then we're just going to scale him down. Alright? Okay, like that. And I'll position it around about there. I'm going to rotate a little bit as well, so that just there's like a little bit of the actual clouds in the picture showing through as well, because that'd be kind of cool, right? So just a little bit, yeah, like that. Okay, and then on top of that, I'm going to add in a hue saturation node, not a node, hue saturation effect. I'm just going to brighten it up a little bit, turn up the contrast, and set it to a pink orangish color, an orangey color, just like that. Let's turn up that lightness, yeah, something like that. Looks pretty good to me. And then, so that this cloud here sort of blends into the background more, and this is the part that really takes too long to do in Blender, and is a cinch to do in a software. You can use an eraser and just like erase part of it. I just tried to, and I think my Photoshop is going a little slow. I think because I'm recording at the same time. That's my excuse. Honestly, I just think Photoshop's just conked on me. No, it'll come back. Just wait. Here we go. Wait for it. It's going to be like a big, like, it's going to appear in like 3, 2, 1. 3, 2. All right. Maybe I should pause the recording until this actually catches up. All right. Okay, there we go. So like I said, it caught up eventually. So you can use an eraser. You might find that it crashes your computer. What is it doing? I'm trying to scale down the brush size of this thing. Okay, so you could like sketch it away like that. Goodness sake. But what I'm going to do instead, because instead if you use the eraser, then once it's gone, you can't ever bring it back. I like to use a mask like that, and then you just like sketch. What happened to the actual changing brush size keyboard shortcut? I thought it used to be the brackets, but now I can't seem to use that. All right. Anyways, this is what I'm doing. I'm just sketching over the top of this, and you can see the effect that it's having. It's slowly bringing out the background underneath it. So I'm using a flow of 20%, you know. And this also makes it look like the light is sort of, you know, streaking across it a little bit, which is also a bonus. So that's cool. And then I can do the exact same thing for this one right here, just to make it look like it's so bright that it's sort of shining through like that, you know? And that's a pretty cool effect. It's not too bad. Now, like I said, with the these little artifacts, they're pretty easy to fix with a clone brush. You just, you just select it like this, and you just sort of paint over it. You guys know how to use a clone brush, I'm sure. It's a lot easier than having to go into Blender and try and fix things yourself. So that's pretty much it. Now, you might be wondering, how did I get that lens flare? All right, somebody was actually asking me that. Not that it's a stupid question. Somebody was asking me that on Twitter. They wanted to know how it was done in Blender. It's not done in Blender. It was done in After Effects using Andrew Kramer's famous optical flares plugin, which I purchased just for this project because I thought, you know, I've been wanting to. Oh, come on now. All right, so I've moved all the files. I've been wanting to use one of Andrew Kramer's optical flares for a long time, so I wanted to try it out, and so yeah, I purchased it just for this. That's a cool story, isn't it? So anyways, I'll bring in. Where is it? Where did I save it? Oh, sorry guys. This is not at all. Okay, I saved it in the tutorial folder. Come on. Tutorial folder. Oh, it's a Photoshop file. Okay. merge the layers, and I'll make a new composition. And so this is how I did it. Just for those of you that are, you know, curious, and maybe you have yourself your own optical flares license as well. It's very easy to do. Set that on transparent and use that as the background. Let's go options. We bring up this whole thing here. And then essentially, I think I just chose like one of the presets and I tweaked it a little bit until it looked cool. Okay, that's natural flares. I mean, Andrew Kramer knows what he's doing. Like, these are cool. These are really cool stuff. Stuff that I wish was in... you know, I wish we had something like this in Blender. And actually, there's somebody who's working on a solution like this for Blender. So that should be cool if that happens. Hoping that it does. I used something like this, and then I think I used an iris on top of it. Yeah, something like that. And then I hit OK. And that's pretty much how it was done. And then the location, position that there. And then the blending mode, I think I set to overlay. Yeah. And then that was roughly it. I think that's how you're supposed to overlay, whatever. But that's how I got my final image, which was this guy right here. So that's essentially it. That was really anticlimactic. Wow, right up to the end there, and it just like fell apart. But there you go, guys. So hopefully there was some things that you learned in this tutorial, and yeah, clouds, as you can see, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of like tweaking to get things right. But now you know those settings, you can save yourself 2 weeks of work. So if you make some cool stuff, and I'm really hoping that people do send through their renders, make something cool, like make something like unique or something, and post it in the comments on Blender Guru. Share your work. You know, it's encouraging to see the work that you guys create. So if you can do that, that'd be great. If you want more tutorials like this, hit subscribe on YouTube. You can like it on Facebook as well. I'm doing the whole plug at the end of my tutorials now. So yeah, that's it from me, guys. And until next time, thank you for watching. Bye.